Welcome back, everyone. Going into the second half here of Fandom Dungeons and Dragons. Matt, let's talk a little bit about Critical Role. You guys have been on Twitch now a year and a half, 2 years?
Creeping up on a year and almost a year and a half in a couple months. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I guess the origins of that is that you guys were playing before that ever happened. It wasn't an initiative that was brought on Twitch as everyone being there the first time. You guys played before, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we've been playing. I mentioned a little bit before, but we started off as a one shot just to kind of bring Liam and a bunch of our friends who had never played an RPG before into a game of D&D and just see how they'd react. And it's one of my favorite moments as a dungeon master or game master is bringing people in who don't have experience, don't know what really how it works, and that moment that it clicks, that moment they're like, oh, I can attempt anything.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful moment, and so that I love doing that. And so that was kind of the purpose of that one shot. But they enjoyed it so much, it kind of turned into a campaign, and it was more of an excuse to get together with a lot of friends who were normally too busy to schedule. So now we had more of an excuse to see each other more often. We played for 2 years, and over that time, from a bunch of us just nerding out at different voiceover sessions and, wanting to talk about, like everyone does, has a good campaign. You want to just shout to the world, like, it was so cool. We took down a Baylor, and everyone's like, I don't know what the fuck that means. Go away. That was us for 2 years. But word got out in the industry a little bit of this kind of voiceover D&D game. There's a bunch of nerds that would go and play together. And Ashley Johnson, who was our cleric, some of you guys may know her from she's on the show Blind Spot. She's Ellie in The Last of Us. Mm-hmm. She's our cleric, Pike Trickfoot, and she was at a party with Felicia Day and began talking to her about our D&D game, just like gushing to her about what happened in the last session. And Felicia was like, well, why don't you guys think about doing this on the internet? And so Felicia contacted me, and we began to have conversations with Geek and Sundry about it. But we were very guarded about it because it was a very, it was a private game, and we enjoyed it for ourselves, personal. Whenever you put something on the internet that you love, there's like a good chance it'll just be drowned in acid or set aflame.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, understand that.
Yeah, I like the kind of sad resignation that we're all feeling. Right? They're like, yeah, that's real.
Yeah.
So we were very careful about that, and we had a lot of meetings, and there were discussions from some corporate folks at the company that weren't quite as understanding or didn't understand it too. I'm like, yeah, well, you could like play some of the game, and then you could play like some of the video game as the boss fight, or we can find ways to incorporate the brand of different. And I was like, no, I don't want this to be a commercial.
We just want to play D&D, Mr. Suit.
We didn't want to change our game because we're playing it for fun, and if you want to put it on your network, you can do that, but we don't want to alter what we do. And so Twitch hadn't emerged then, and so our meetings just kept going and weren't really going anywhere, and we were kind of relegated to maybe it was never going to be a thing, and that's fine, we'll just keep playing for fun. And then Twitch hit and began to really prove a new platform of both distributing and consuming as a community. And they were open to more long form kind of hangout based media, and so Geek and Sundry was like, well, we're launching a Twitch channel. Would you be interested in that? And I'm like, okay, as long as you're just turning the cameras on and letting us fuck around with dice for 3 hours, then yes, let's give it a shot. And if it doesn't work out in 6 weeks, we'll just go back to our private game. And that's kind of how the show started. And it became something far more than we ever expected.
Now, was the first show, was that an ongoing story that you guys just brought in, or did you kind of start over on the first show?
No, it was the same characters we've been playing for 2 years, but we had just managed to get to a point where a major arc had completed.
Okay. So it just timed out well.
Exactly. And I kind of gave the players, as part of the story, a 6-month hiatus. They finished the major arc, and then there's going to be a 6-month break where their characters could kind of go off and have their own side adventures, just narratively. They'd write back like a page and a half of what they did on their summer vacation, kind of a feel. And then they got back together, and that was when our first episode began. So it was a new arc. It was a fresh story with characters they had already kind of realized. And in a way, the audience was kind of coming in the middle of a world, but at least a new part of the story. So it wasn't too crazy.
Right.
That's a really nice way to start a campaign.
Yeah, sure. I was just thinking about that. We've never really done a campaign on roleplay where we're going in with, the world already having X amount of time built into it. It's more like we're going into the first show, and it's like, this is the world, and this is kind of the thing that we know about the world, but we're not saying that we know just this, but we know just this. Like, that's an interesting thing. I've never really thought about doing a show like that in an already existing world, I guess is maybe the best way to say that.
it was an interesting choice. I think it was good for us because a lot of the players had no previous gaming experience with tabletop gaming. If we were to just throw them in that room and roll up characters, it would have been a much different episode. They would have been far more uncomfortable and like, I punched the door, you know. It would,
Right.
So for those that were less experienced for the game, it was good that they had already been kind of familiar with their character personality and kind of where they fit in that narrative. So what turned out being what I thought would be a difficult introduction to the story ended up being actually a pretty good boon for the audience because we all already pretty well knew how the game would run, how their characters worked, and we just kind of started from there and hope people wanted to watch.
Right. One of the things Adam is talked about, and the other DM, Steven and Neil, that we've had on Roleplay, is the idea of planning a campaign, a tabletop campaign for a live audience or for an audience rather than planning one for like a group of friends. What for you is there a difference there, or do you just kind of imagine it the same way you would if you were just playing with these guys, not with cameras on you?
I approach the preparation for it the same way because ultimately we're still playing the game for us.
Right.
And I think as long as we're really enjoying it, then that'll resonate with the audience, hopefully. And if it doesn't, that doesn't really matter. We're not looking to make this some crazy success. We're looking to have fun playing this game, and it's become something more than we expected. But the moment it stops becoming fun is the moment we stop doing it for us. You know, we all have other careers.
Right. This is not the career that's guiding you. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So for us, we want to make sure that we're still enjoying it. And we think, just like any of us that follow our passions as a career, when we're passionate and we're enjoying ourselves with what we're doing, that comes through in the work. And that's what people connect and are drawn towards. And that honesty and that passion, I think, is what really built up this amazing tabletop community that all of us get to be a part of. It's been really, really cool to see that as the reemergence of tabletop gaming and board gaming has been in the recent years, the community that's come out of that is born out of the indoor kids in a lot of places. That's born out of the honest creative types, the shy introverts that now have a place to belong again. It's this passionate honesty, and it's been really, really cool to see, even be a part of that with what we've done. And I think as long as we stick to that, we'll be good.
Has it always been, you guys, it's 5th edition on Critical Role, right? Like, has it always been 5th edition? You said you started with something else, right?
Yeah, our very, very first session, it was a very, very pared down version of 4th edition I made for everyone's characters, meaning it was like everyone had one at will, one encounter, and like a daily. Like I wanted to keep it really simple for those who had never played an RPG before. But once it became a campaign, I was like, okay, fuck no, we're not doing 4th edition. Let's do Pathfinder. And so then we remade everyone's character of equal level. I think it was level 3 in Pathfinder. And then we played that for 2 years. And the reason we converted to 5th edition for the stream was 5th edition had been out for about 8 or so months. And I was waiting to hear about how the community felt about it. 4th edition had been such an unwieldy, difficult system for me that I wanted to make sure that 5th edition wasn't that. And so by then, the consensus was it was a really good system. It called back to all the things I loved about Dungeons & Dragons. And with the number of players that we had and the intent of now streaming it live, I wanted the combat to run as smooth as I possibly could. And as much as I love Pathfinder, when you have 7 to 8 players, the floating modifiers and the esoteric math that tends to build, it's unwieldy for a live production. So we decided to convert over to 5th edition to help aid that process as well. And overall, I've fallen in love with it.
Yeah. I think when we started using 5th here I think it actually been out. We did our first West Marches show the second or third week, right?
We played, this is a real early one for me. It was right around like the 2nd episode of Swan Song, maybe. Okay. You and me and Steven and Neil did a little one shot.
Oh, that's right. That's what that was. Yeah.
Right after the Fandelver box set came out.
Yeah.
We gave that a try. Yeah, but like it's interesting because a lot of people have this experience of either they buy into whatever the modern edition of D&D is, because that's, you're like, I want to play D&D, go to Amazon, you look up D&D and there it is. So people have these different watermarks, but with roleplay, you had this experience with a very customized version of 2nd edition and then jump straight to 5th, and it's kind of like leapt around. Whereas like Matt, you're describing Critical Role having a fairly like normative, like I think a lot of people did that where they were like, we're going to play 4th edition because it's what's out, and then move on to Pathfinder, and then when 5th edition comes out, move to that. Like there's pathways through different various versions of D&D, which is really interesting.
For for sure. In terms of, you guys had so many players on that show, much more than I've ever played with. What was that like in terms of playing for the live experience? Was it something that you you thought about going in that, man, there's going to be a lot of people talking at once and our games get maybe a little bit loud? Is that going to work on what we're trying to do here in terms of streaming it? Is Geek and Sundry going to like that? Like, was that ever a thought?
We weren't too concerned with what Geek and Sundry wanted. We were more just concerned about wanting to keep playing our game. However, I will say, as a person that loves being deep in the narrative, and while I don't mind a little bit of table talk, as a person who's trying to keep everyone engaged, it can be a little frustrating from time to time, but not a huge deal. Going in front of the camera has definitely cut a lot of that out. A lot of our players did a lot less of the, oh yeah, man, Tuesday was hard at work. All the kids really been.
Oh yeah.
Over this cold, the wife doesn't want me to be here. And all that was kind of eliminated once the camera was there. So that was one positive aspect of it. I think we were all kind of afraid that people would, being performers, that we would end up playing up for the audience a little more, and it wouldn't, it'd be more of a performance than an actual game. But we were very excited to find that wasn't the case. Once the nerves wore off, the first 30 minutes of the episode, it was just us back at our table rolling dice. But I will say the biggest difference is, one, playing more often.
Yeah, you guys are every week, no matter what, pretty much. You guys are putting on something on Thursday night, yeah.
Yeah, which was a good and a bad thing. Bad because it's just more for us to carve out, and for me, a lot more preparation consistently. But at the same time, before the stream, we could only play once every 6 to 8 weeks, really, because two of our players had like multiple children, and it was hard to cut out time.
That's interesting. I didn't really. Okay.
Yeah, mind you, we play like marathon 12-hour sessions when we do play.
Okay. Never mind. Now it makes sense. That's the same thing.
Yeah,
yeah.
We book out like a whole Sunday. We get mimosas at 10 a.m. and then I'll leave at midnight. I was like, that sort of thing. But now we do it in smaller chunks over extended, a shorter period of time.
You guys go longer than 4 hours on Thursdays, right? You're in like sometimes the 5 or 6.
We try and keep it to about 3.5 hours, but I also don't, if we're in the middle of a major battle or the current narrative beats aren't a good natural place to stop, then we'll continue pushing until we find a good break point.
Because I'm pretty sure I've tuned in at like 1 a.m. my time, and they're still fucking going. Like,
we've had a few episodes that crested in the 5-hour territory. Those are usually like big arc completion moments, or a boss fight that ended up just getting more complicated and crazy, and everyone's like, "Oh shit!" The tension's building. And we did for a while. We did something called Christmas. This was one of the strangest and craziest experiences out of the show. As we began to do it, people began to send presents. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, and we're like, "That's really cool." Well, shit, we'll open this gift that someone gave us on the stream afterward.
Right.
And then more started to arrive, and we're like, "Oh, this is new," and it's really cool to kind of have that feedback from the community. But at the same time, we're like, we don't need anything. But
right.
Handmade stuff is really sweet, and we like the where the heart is behind it. And then Christmas began to become an hour and a half, 2 hours after the show finished. So we had to eventually just kind of stop doing that, and we'll just do them occasionally on Periscopes and stuff. So some of the episodes ended up going late because we were opening a bunch of awesome
fan gifts for so long. Yeah. We've always, obviously roleplay is a little bit different because we're playing on Skype and Zoom and all that stuff, and you guys are all in person. And in the same line, I've never had a P.O. box because I'm always really afraid of what I'm going to get sent to me. Not to say that my fans are weird, but just like, I don't want to get a stuffed doll of myself that I made in my, like, it would be cool, but it's also like, all right, I'm just going to put this over here.
If anyone wants to make a creepy stuffed animal that looks like me, do it. Get it.
Send him to Adam.
Yeah, there you go. All right, just hit up Adam's P.O. box. Yeah.
It's fascinating hearing your experience with just taking this like home group and saying, okay, this is the show, and the show will bend around the group. Whereas like my experience with roleplay, GMing on roleplay has dramatically changed the way that I GM, because I start to build narrative arcs into a 1 hour and 4 hour scope. So I'll say, okay, I'm aware that we're coming up on a break, so I can build tension towards that moment. If I'm going to do something that's a big deal, I'll often hold it, right? I'll hold it in reserve for the end of an episode or something like that. And so it's been like, we're still playing the game. We're still using all the rules as they're written. But for me, my GMing has taken a lot of change from the sort of cinematic approach that we have these time constraints for. It's fascinating though, because the model is really different, right? Like we're playing.
Well, do you guys take breaks? You take one break on Critical Role, right?
You take like one break that can be anywhere between like 8:30 or 9:45, depending on whenever we find a good.
Right, we're structured. We take break no matter what every hour, or else the cast gets really upset at me. And sometimes we'll go over in the chat, just like, please, I have to. Please let me use the restroom.
Oh, trust me, I get plenty of shit for that as well. But also just to speak to that too, Adam, like. But that also probably makes it a better experience for the audience as well. And that's also what's really cool about what you do with your show, is because you're so conscious of the media structure and the audience being the consumer of this as well as your players, that I think that makes it a better viewing experience overall probably than our show, unless you're really deep into those long form narratives and you have the time to give into it and maybe a catheter.
Well, what's great about it is that they both, like, we're doing the same thing fundamentally. We're playing Dungeons and Dragons, right. But there's allowances that don't get spoken of in Dungeon Master's guides about the ways things are narrated, or like how there's a whole Marshall McLuhan thing here somewhere about the idea of the media and the message and like how we present that message. Like I found my GMing has become very cinematic in the way that I will describe things that are off screen, or I'll describe things as establishing shots and stuff like that, because I'm aware that we have this audience that I'm helping them. They're a player in my group in a lot of ways. Yeah. They don't get to contribute in the narrative, but I narrate to them to create a specific experience. Yeah, and I wonder, because we've been talking, JP and I have been talking about doing some live stuff as like special events for the show, and I'm really curious to see how the player dynamic is different at the table.
Same here. We've done a couple of those with people like Jeff and Caitlin and stuff, where we have been all in person around what is supposed to be kind of a table. What was really just a crappy thing in the middle of an MLG, which I talked about already, which just the most bizarre thing. But I've never had like an actual, kind of like what you guys have, or exactly what you guys have, where you have an actual set and the focus is what's going on the table. It's not, hey, we're at MLG where there's, a Call of Duty event going on and we're playing D&D up here on one of these weird sets.
Right.
Like totally. I'm interested what that dynamic is too, because I don't know. It might just be really bad. I don't know how people are going to react.
You'll be surprised. It's not that different than when you play remotely, other than there is something cool about being in person, about having direct eye contact when you're making interactions.
Right. It makes sequences a lot more personal, I feel.
Yeah. But at the same time, even watching what you guys do, you guys still are also heavily invested in the story and the character. I really think you'll be surprised how little of it changes, other than your own personal energy with the other players.
Sure. Okay.
What's interesting for me, particularly for the difference between in person and online, is that online everyone is the same height, but in person I'm very short and everyone else is very tall.
I didn't even think about that. We got to get some risers for the desk.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a booster seat if anyone's gonna take me seriously as a GM, because otherwise it'll just be me staring up at my players.
We filmed
from behind my tiny screen.
We filmed a Patreon video about 2 weekends ago, or 1 weekend ago, and Adam stood next to me and he came up to about here on my shoulder, and the video was like, great. We couldn't get anything centered because Adam's like 5'4",
like five, just barely 5'6",
5'6", and I'm like 6'1", 6'3", and it was just like, oh man, we got to figure something out for live shows because everyone is just really different sizes, and it's gonna look kind of weird on camera because we are just used to being like perfectly framed, right? And that's interesting.
Yeah, but at the same time too, that's a fun visual perspective as well. Like our player Travis, who you look at him and he's the quintessential like football.
That's the big. Okay.
He plays for Barbarian Grog. He's 6'4", I want to say, and just massive dude. And so you have the lineup at the table, and it's not until he sits up straight that you see how large he is, because once he's engaged in the story, he's like all hunched down with his shoulders down, like right there in it.
It is always funny when I tune in. He's like, 3 3 people, and then 2 people, which is actually just one person at the end of the table because he's so fucking built. Yeah.
He's a big dude.
Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, it's. I will say, as far as playing together versus online, there is a magic when you're in person, because you're there at the table, and the energy and that tension is shared in the space. But online at the same time, it allows it in a weird way, because it's through cameras and through screens, to feel almost like it's a cinematic media, at least in my experience, because each person's experience is part of the communal edit.
Right.
As being like a bunch of things jumbled into one space, everything almost has a more structured presentation element of it. I played Traveler for a while via Skype with a bunch of friends, and it was a really, really great experience, because it allowed us all to feel like we had our own computer monitors within sci-fi settings, talking to each other and stuff. So like the actual format worked well for how we were role playing.
Nice. Adam, do you have any questions? I've kind of been hogging this, but we turned into a Matt interview, which I guess this was in some aspects going to be. But any questions for you, Adam?
No, I mean, I'm just like we were saying, I'm fascinated about the idea of like having the audience and how that's modified your gymming at all, which it sounds like it hasn't much, which is really cool, because it's totally opposite from my experience. Yeah, I mean, I think my question would probably be like, you know, we talked a little bit about before how D&D is role-playing games to a lot of people. You just mentioned Traveler. Do you have any other games that you play or have played that you really like that aren't just the D&Ds?
Yeah. I really, really enjoy Deadlands. I mentioned this a few times in the stream. Deadlands is one of my favorite world settings. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's called the Weird West, and it basically is like the old mid to late 1800s, you know, classic Deadwood style Old West, except the introduction of like mystic energies, demonic presence, a little bit of magic and mystery to the world, and it's a lot of fun. Played that for a little bit.
I remember reading a copy of Deadlands back when I worked at the game store and being blown away that Bruce Campbell had written the foreword to the edition that I was reading.
Are you serious?
Yeah, Bruce Campbell. He wrote the foreword to it about playing role-playing games and about Westerns, and I read it and I was like,
great.
Whoa. And I think that was my first brush with like, whoa, a famous person plays role-playing games?
Yeah.
Such a huge dork after all.
I like that, but at the same time, the fixation of like, oh my God, it's so crazy that this person plays D&D is kind of just like, yeah, he's a nerd. Like,
well, it is now certainly. I mean, in the like late 90s or whatever, when that version of Deadlands came out, it was much less the case. It was still very like, because it wasn't. I think now we have this new generation of role players, and in the 80s it was just a thing everyone did. But in the interim, in this awkward middle school, you were either an old dude who used to play D&D, or like you were just kind of out of touch. It was not a thing that anyone really did that much.
Yeah.
Or you were playing vampire in goth clubs.
Oh yeah, so that's the other thing, right? There's a phase, if you grew up with role-playing games, there's a phase you either went through or watched people go through where they sloughed off their Dungeons and Dragons shell and became sexy, awkward goths underneath. Yeah. Because that was a thing, and the gaming space, the hobby, reacted to Dungeons and Dragons and games like it by being like, no, we're cooler than that. We have clove cigarettes and we listen to The Cure.
Yeah.
So did you Matt, did you go through a vampire phase?
I sure did.
I was peripheral to it. I had a lot of friends, and still do to this day. I love the goth club scene in Los Angeles. I've been goth clubbing a lot. Though I'm not necessarily a goth per se. I guess it can be in some ways. But like Taliesin, who's in our show, has been a longtime friend of mine. He basically ran a lot of the LA goth club scene through the late 90s to the mid 2000s.
Wow.
And I found that as far as club experiences go, goth clubs are some of the most welcoming and like positive atmosphere nightclubs you can go to.
Ironically.
Yeah, I feel like most groups like that are always going to be the most welcoming, because they just accept what they are and everyone's cool with that. And they're not gonna be the people like, you're not gothy enough here. Get the fuck out of our club. They'll be like, no, fucking come in. That's great. That's awesome.
We're all just a bunch of nerds that like to dress up occasionally and go listen to music and talk about our books we're reading. And that was kind of the experience. And then you add the vampire or werewolf element to that, where you now have a live role-playing element to the normal, social things you would be doing on a Saturday night. And it was kind of cool to watch this whole community emerge. And Taliesin was heavily involved in it. I had a lot of friends that were heavily involved in it. And I LARPed once or twice, and I had not too positive experiences, but only because I didn't understand the rules of the world very well, and then was thrown into the depths of a major political.
You forgot.
Jesus!
You forgot how to play rock paper scissors.
Oh no, it was kind of. I had the guy who was like the head of the chapter up in Simi Valley at the time I was doing a theater show with, and he's like, yeah, come to my house, we'll play some vampire. I'm like, what do I do? He's like, just dress up in something black. Okay. And I had really long hair at the time. It was like past my shoulders, and I looked kind of like a very tiny Peter Steele from Typo Negative. And
perfect.
And so I walk in, and there's 40 people all dressed up in this long, like 2-year running, very politically entwined game, and I didn't really know who my character was. And all of a sudden, the prince of the chapter goes, "And this is my new right-hand man." And I'm like, "Hi guys." And so I was that awkward guy that I was Bill Murray in The Man Who Knew Too Little, where I was all of a sudden thrown in the middle of all this tumultuous, intense political mobility, and everyone was coming to me to be the new focus of the story, and I had no idea what was going on. And so
that
I went
sounds
home,
like my living hell. Like, not because you're LARPing, but because you got thrust into a position where you have to know everything going on, and you're just like, vampires are cool guys, right? Like, man, they're awesome.
Well, so growing up as like a D&D nerd, and I never was really part of the goth scene at the time. I still wore things that weren't black then, but there were two kinds of nerds, right? There were the nerds that I was a part of that listened to heavy metal and they smoked pot and played Dungeons and Dragons, and then there were the nerds that played vampire and like had sex with each other, and like that. There was this very clear dividing line where. That was also part of the inspiration for a lot of friends. They're like, oh, really, really attractive girls that play a role-playing game? Because at the time it was hard to find that community. It was out there, but in a lot of places it wasn't as welcoming to women. And I felt the vampire, it was more of that. It empowered the female gamer and the female presence of the game more than previous games did, and as such, there was much more of a male and female equal ratio in a lot of these settings. And I thought that was kind of what made it so popular at the time too, was it was so inclusive to that subgroup of people of goths who also loved gaming. Yeah. It's fascinating how much impact like vampire and mage and stuff. The tabletop games kind of are going to be, I think, a blip in the grand design history of tabletop, but their LARP stuff, like all the Camarilla and like that's still decades later going very strong, and their contribution to a very specific kind of LARP really, like you said, it brought a lot of people into gaming that would never have been interested before. And it's that situation where it's not turning nerds into vampire players, it's turning people who happen to be goth or industrial fans into role players by way of some other vector, which is not a thing that had really happened prior to that.
I'm really excited to see White Wolf find a way to really rebrand and bring the game back to the forefront, because I think it's really important, like you said, historically to the role-playing games in general and their place in the gaming vernacular. But I feel like they haven't had success really relaunching, recapturing the place it once held in the pantheon of role-playing games. And I'm excited at the prospect of them doing that in the future. So I think there's a lot there that can really be exalted. Exalted's another example.
Good, nice,
yeah, true.
subtle pun, Matt. Well, I think the trick is that we're in this period of time where there's a lot of returning to the roots. People are part of the old school revolution, playing a lot of these really old versions of D&D, and eventually they'll move forward as the timeline did to get to that 90s place where vampire lived. But the trick is that so much of what made vampire appealing to people was its story, was its background, was the fact that the people writing it, the best parts of those books were the fiction, not so much the game design. And it's hard to go back to an intellectual property. You kind of have to repurpose it. Vampire, like Cyberpunk, is very much of its age. Yeah. And if you want to play it non-ironically, you have to find a different way to approach the same themes.
Right.
I completely agree. What actually kind of excites me, and to bring this into an interesting place, watching the mass acceptance of AR technology through games like Pokemon Go and before that, Ingress, I think that's actually a weird training tool for a lot of gamers to, one, bring the idea of a gaming experience into a public and a very crowded public space where other people are welcoming to that. So can you imagine if a Vampire Masquerade rule set, LARPing-based rule set were to release with an AR
component
element in your phone, where, like, as opposed to rock, scissors, paper, you actually had character stats that were, kept
Well,
on an app. And
that's actually really interesting, because so much of Vampire as a thing, why I think the LARPs did so well, is that Vampire is a social experiment, right? It wasn't about a group of people against the world. It was about the internal politics. It was about you and the other players and how you interacted. And there's stuff in Vampire, like they have that ability where they can detect other vampires simply by being in their presence. Now your phone's vibrating. Uh-oh, somebody's a vampire.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
I think that Pokemon Go is definitely going to open up like just the AR world. People will be so much more, and also the VR world. Like people will be like, oh yeah, it's just like Pokemon Go. Like there's not going to be a step that people have to make for that to become a reality for so many other things. And hopefully we'll start seeing, developers take heed of that and actually start doing things with that, like like D&D or even LARPing, where you're just walking around and be like, oh yeah, that guy's a rogue that just walked by me. I wonder if he's going to that thing I'm going to this weekend or something like that. Like,
and the social aspect of partying up, right? Of being like, I'm level 5. I need 3 more people who are level 5. Let's all go to the town meeting hall. And once 4 people are there, you can party up and go on a quest together with some people you've never met, right? Like,
but then of course they're going to be like, but there's another group. And then it's like, 2 fucking groups of nerds were fighting out in the alley. And what's going on with the world?
Yeah, sadly, Pokemon Go will not fix the fact that everyone is terrible all the time.
Nature is still human nature, but
that's true. We got to fix that before we could go into another game for sure. Adam, I want to talk a little bit about, you've created and launched your own game with Dungeon World and that process. Like what was that like, and the process leading up to it? What made you be like, I'm going to make my own fucking game. Screw making worlds. Let's make my own game.
Yeah, I mean, I think all design comes from, in some way or another, the fundamental desire to fix what you perceive to be a problem, whether it's for yourself or for a larger group of people. And for me, that problem was players who wanted to play old school style D&D but did not want to learn any rules. They just wanted to describe the thing they were doing and then maybe roll some funny shaped dice and then move the fuck on. So Dungeon World was my solution to a very specific player group that ended up being a problem fix that a lot of other people picked up and wanted to incorporate. Because I think there was this, it came out during this period prior to 5e, where if you wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, it was a very mechanically focused experience. Roleplay was sort of optional to the game. And people wanted this fiction first, sort of narratively driven dungeon crawl thing that still felt familiar. So for me, Dungeon World came out of a desire to pay homage to, without exactly replicating the D&D of my past. So we started working on that game in, I think, late 2010 or 2011, and between working full-time jobs and actually playing games and testing it took us about 2.5, 3 years to publish. But it was one of those things where we got to a point with, we always gave the game away, right? It's Creative Commons now, and the text has always been available for people to download. And it got to a point where people were asking us, like, I want this as an actual book. Like, I would like to be able to take it to my table and play it. And so the Kickstarter and that whole process was really the response to fans kind of getting on board with the game. And I find it really funny now, because there are people who, I think this is true of anybody who spends time in the public eye, people get an idea of what you do or don't like, or who you are, or the kinds of things you're into. And when we announced we were going to start Court of Swords, we were going to do the D&D fandom, there was a portion of the roleplay audience who were like, Adam doesn't like D&D. Adam hates Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, no. But so it's funny for me because it's very different from D&D in a lot of ways, but it's my kind of love letter to the work of Gygax and Arneson, and kind of like modifying their stuff. And to this day, my favorite thing anyone has ever said about Dungeon World was, I was at Gen Con 2 years ago. I was outside, and I was talking to a couple of people there. I didn't know them to see them, but we were just having like the kind of convention conversation you have when you just run into someone outside. And we were talking, and this like older dude who's having a cigarette was like, "Oh, you made Dungeon World? I played that game." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. What'd you think?" He was like, "Oh, I really liked it." And after the conversation, somebody I was with was like, "Oh, that was Frank Mincer. That was like, he's like the BACMI set for D&D. He's like an old school D&D guy from way back." And like that for me felt
awesome.
Like amazing. That's like my favorite thing I think I've ever had happen.
To speak to that, man, one of the things that I'm really loving about the reemergence of tabletop gaming is it's becoming a family activity. more than it was before. I'm
yeah.
seeing so many people, so many either adults that grew up with D&D and like lost touch or didn't think it would ever happen again, that are rediscovering it and finding it as a great way to kind of reestablish a family unit for game time and to like really build those bonds where they all sit and make a story together as a family. And I love that. But the question comes up often, well, I want to run this, but my kids are kind of young. You know, it's
then you show them Mouse Guard RPG.
Yeah, well, no, or Dungeon World, actually.
Or Dungeon World, sure. Yeah.
Dungeon World has been our biggest suggestion, and watching so many people take that at panels, they show up and like, thank you for the suggestion. Dungeon World has been amazing. It's allowed our family, our like 6 and 7 year olds to really kind of bond where they used to fight together all the time. And
that's awesome.
Camaraderie. So on top of the fact that it's a great throwback to those kind of less rules heavy systems, it's become a really, really great initiation tool for young gamers and family units to kind of enjoy the narrative storytelling of D&D. It's awesome.
We've had a couple fans who have been like, yeah, we play with a family, and I'm like, I could see how that'd be really cool, but also like really awful. It's got to be terrifying, like playing with your brother and your mom, and it's like, God damn it, Dad, what the fuck are you doing?
No, dude, I ran one game for my parents and my brother.
Yeah.
Only one. My dad made a bard with the last name Fender, which he actually put like TM next to Fender on his character.
Oh my God.
Nice.
And within 10 minutes, both my mom and my dad's characters were flirting. And I
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I was like, abort.
Oh my God. Jesus. Yeah. That's about what I would expect.
Yeah.
Adam, I think one of my first experiences in terms of just talking with you was when I decided to swap what was originally Eben, the game that I DM'd, and the first time I ever DM'd, from 2E over to Dungeon World, which became Vigil. And it was a weird thing because we had done some one shots. I think we did Vigil either before or after R&D, which is where we played Dungeon World with Steven DMing that. And for you, to make the question out of this is, what was it like for you seeing your game played on the internet, and how bad did it piss you off that we fucked every rule over? Like what?
It's funny because I didn't have like I watched some of the R&D because that's kind of that was my introduction to all the role play stuff. People were pinging me and they're like, oh, some people are playing your game on Twitch. So I watched a little bit of it, and at the time I had no idea. Like I didn't know who like you or Sean or Marcus were. I remember having a conversation with some friends, being like, "Do you know who this like itmeJP guy is? You ever heard of Day 9?" And my friends were all big StarCraft.
They were probably like, "No, I've never heard of Oh, fucking Day. Yes, I know all about Day 9."
But their response, because my nerdiness is very focused on tabletop RPGs. So when I said this, I asked this asinine question to them. They were like, "Yes, of course we know who these people are." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Some sort of internet famous people playing my game." It was hard to watch Jeff GM Dungeon World just because
it's just hard to watch Jeff DM anything. I mean,
he didn't care. He wanted to tell a story and occasionally rolled some dice, which is fine. That's the spirit of Dungeon World. Like I just was like, okay, you're not really like, you're kind of trying to play it. That's fine. You're doing your thing. But I mean, I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't made Dungeon World and that R&D season hadn't happened. Right. So it's been really interesting kind of like going through that process.
One of my favorite things is when we did Vigil, and a bunch of the people that we were playing with wanted, custom characters. Because that's one thing that Dungeon World does really well, is that you can just make custom characters with how the rule set works. And I remember I kept coming to you and be like, so my player kind of wants to do this. What do you think would work here? And then after about like the, I don't know, 8th time of doing this, I realized that I wasn't DMing anymore at that point, and I was literally just be like, can you solve my problems for me? Can you just fucking make this player happy? Because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even understand your fucking game, Adam.
We all had that luxury.
Yeah. I realized that I was just spoiled, and I was like, Adam, can you fix this problem for me? And I was like, this guy probably thinks I'm the biggest piece of shit, but I'm streaming his game, and he's probably getting some kickback of some sort, so fuck it, I'm just going to keep asking these questions. It was fun times, for sure, streaming that. I always just wondered, like, if you watched the game and you were like, oh, all right, they went that way. Okay. I guess you could do that. Like, that's a cool thing.
As a designer, you really only get one way to influence games, right? Like there are thousands of games of Dungeon World being played all over the place, and I can't watch or sit in or even know that that most of them exist. And so as a designer, all you can really do is impart as much into the game about what you hope their games will be like as you can, and try to be clear about it so they can interpret the rules in such a way that they'll play it right. But with a game like Dungeon World, it was designed to be flexible, and folks were able to make changes to it such that if you don't like the way that it was written, there's clear instruction in the game to change it, right? And so what might start as a mistake, if it feels like the right way to play, you can change the rule. You don't have to change the game itself, like the way you're playing it. So I'm pretty forgiving of people playing Dungeon World wrong, and thankfully, because I created it in an era where fans and designers have so much ability to interact, when some random person on Twitter is like, I don't understand this rule, it's not that hard for me to be like, oh, actually, here, there you go.
Yeah. Well, Matt, for you, do you have any aspirations of going that route and doing something on your own, or will you just kind of, I guess, answer that, and then I'll follow up.
You made a D&D thing, right, Matt?
I've made a few things on the DMs Guild. It was never my intent to create content, really. It was after we did the D and Diesel short, which was still one of the most surreal moments of my life, where we got a very truncated one shot for Vin Diesel.
I remember when that came out, I was like, are they going to do like a full 4-hour show? And then I was like, oh, it was 30 minutes. Yeah, that's about.
Which to let you know, when they first told me 3 days beforehand, like, hey, we want you to Dungeon Master for Vin Diesel. You have a 2 hour.
You got 3 hours before.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, so a 2-hour game, I can make a 2-hour one shot. And then the day before it happened, they're like, his manager said he can only be there for about an hour, so we have to. Okay, I'll take the 2 hour I prepped. I'll truncate it to an hour. I can do that. I show up in the day, like, his manager called. He only has about 22 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay, let's try and make an arc in 22 minutes. So it was
Jesus Christ.
It was a unique thing, but because it was kind of to play into his Witch Hunter movie, I ended up making kind of a custom class based on this just moments I saw in the trailer to make him feel like he was still playing his character from the movie in the game. And then because I messed with those tweaks, I went home afterward and was like, it's actually some kind of cool mechanics there. And I began to just play around with the idea of this kind of Witch Hunter, could like create elemental effects on a weapon, and like blood-based curse magic eventually came out of that. And then I ended up deciding I wanted to make it my own. I changed the name to a Blood Hunter. And then it was my first time really ever creating a new, custom content piece for the world. And I put it out on the Vegan Center website, and the community had such great feedback, both from a theme standpoint and from a balancing standpoint, because I've been GMing a lot of 5th edition, but the balance is still something that you find out over time. And so I discovered Unearthed Arcana on Reddit, and a lot of great communities that do great homebrew and have good ideas on how to balance properly. So community feedback came in, I tweaked it, and then in the DMs Guild came out, it was like the perfect opportunity for anyone to put their homebrew stuff up. So I threw it up there, and it got even better feedback, got tweaked further. And I think we're in this cool place now where the community itself is so involved in supporting and helping its own created content that anyone can take their hand at it, as long as you are willing to take the slings and arrows of a sometimes brutal, constructive criticism-based community. You could learn a lot of really, really great tools about game design in just trying it out.
I have to ask before you go on, Adam, in terms of creating the character, you said you changed the name, like, and again, this is none of my business. I'm just really curious. Legally, did you approach them and be like, hey, I really liked your character. I'm going to make my own character based off of what you played in my game and just see how that goes? Like, was there a process there, or did you just do it?
I just did it. Like,
okay. I was just curious, like, how that would work, because you always hear of, like, the big names that are just like, actually, you can't do that, or you're going to have to, like, give me a cut of this or something. Like, I was just curious if there was a deal that was made. If you sold your soul to Vin Diesel or something.
If I was going to sell my soul, that's one of the options.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad choice.
Yeah, true enough. But no, it was more of because very few. The whole design was all original, just based on like one shot in the trailer where he has a flaming sword, and I was like, all right, that's all I have on his character. I'll try and make a mechanic based on that, and that was the real seed of where it started. The rest of it was all original, and then Witch Hunter isn't a trademarked name. That's like it's been used in many RPGs.
That's true. Yeah,
and even with that, the Witch Hunter, what a classic Witch Hunter you imagine, is very different from what I ended up designing. So I wanted to come up with a name that was unique and different enough where it wasn't being compared to older like Pathfinder Witch Hunter type classes and was its own unique thing. And that's where the Blood Hunter name came up. And I learned a lot just going through that one development process. And I don't know if I'd ever really like go into designing my own like system per se. I tried that when I was 18. Me and my cousin made like we spent an entire summer developing like an underworld.
What are you talking about? 18-year-olds and their cousins are the best game designers.
I still have sheets and I'll go back and look at them and be like, this is the most world. Especially since all of our gaming experiences was based off second edition at that point in time.
Oh, so, yeah. You're learning bad lessons from throwing good design after bad. Well, I think it sort of speaks to the idea that, and this is something that I've always held true, is that every GM, given enough time, becomes, even in some small way, a game designer. Like, if you don't like the inspiration rules and you change them for your home campaign, you're a game designer, right? Like, if you made your own class, game designer. If you change some spells in the game designer. Like, it's not a big thing. You don't have to publish a game to consider yourself part of the game design community. You can just make a custom class for Vin Diesel. That's all you have to do. And it becomes a part of the ongoing kind of narrative of all game designers anywhere. And like you said, I think with things like the DMs Guild, with the way that indie publishing is so much easier now because of things like Drive-Thru and Kickstarter, like we're getting more games, more variety of games, smaller, weirder games than we ever would have prior to now.
Yeah.
And role-playing has become this thing that's bigger than just swords and sorcery and dungeons. There's all kinds of like weird stuff, and whatever you're into, there's probably a role-playing game that comes pretty close. And if there isn't, it's much easier now than it ever used to be to make your own.
Definitely, yeah. That was something that I think I learned over the course of roleplay, that I've learned over the course of roleplay, is that, you know, D&D's kind of just the beginning, and that there, like you said, is pretty much a rule set for any type of setting that you want to play in, no matter what. Even if you want to play like a future sci-fi Western world where vampires run everything, you're like, well, that probably exists. Like, you can probably go find that, and if it doesn't, you could just bend a rule set to that world and just create that world yourself. Yeah. So it's one of the cool things.
GURPS has it handled for you. She'll handle everything.
Yeah.
We used to play a game in the game store I worked at where we would close our eyes and spin around and point at 2 GURPS books, and then you had to make up a campaign setting based on them. Awesome. So, you know, occasionally you'd be like, we'd get bored. Nobody would come anywhere. Like, all right, Imperial Rome and dinosaur. All right. So dinosaurs wandering around Imperial Rome, the legions riding Tyrannosaurus. Like, there's generic games that try to do that, and there's now like the indie space is full of these highly targeted games that are like, this is a game where you play virginal teenage Mormon cowboy paladins, and your job is to go from town to town, making sure that everyone is behaving themselves and that sin isn't taking place. There's no sorcery in this town.
Yeah.
And this is like a hyper-focused game about one thing, and it does that one thing incredibly well. And because there are so many of these small press games, instead of trying to make like D&D with the serial numbers filed off for something else, you're getting games expressly dedicated to a very specific kind of thing, which is super cool.
Just so people, you're talking about Dogs in the Vineyard, right?
Yeah, Dogs in the Vineyard.
Dogs in the Vineyard was the game he was just referencing, for those that are curious, and we've actually thought about running it for a one-shot or something, because the world does just sound bizarre and super interesting to jump into.
Dogs is fantastic.
I feel like we should have said this, or I should have said this at the beginning of the show, but people always ask, like, for those that aren't into D&D, or for those that have never watched the show before, and I stream a lot of other games here, and we'll get a lot of people that are just, you know, your average teenager who's a huge fan of Overwatch, but he has no idea what Dungeons and Dragons is or how it works. And I think the best way I've always said it is that, and the best way I've always heard it said, is imagine a world where you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, at any point in the day, and all you have to do is roll a die. And you don't have to build a graphic. There's no graphics. It's all in your head. You just do whatever the hell you want. And I think the second that people understand that, whether they understand it before or whether they understand it after playing, like Matt was saying, it clicks. And that's the click where people have no boundaries whatsoever in a lot of the tabletop RPGs, besides the rules that are there before you. And that's what makes D&D so great.
You can watch someone who learns D&D, you can watch them go through that process, because they start by being like, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? And then eventually they're like, I'm doing this. And you're like, oh, okay, you get it now. You don't have to ask permission anymore.
At its heart, it's what we all did as kids in our front yard. You know, it was us living in our heads, making up storylines,
Right.
Giving titles or characters to each other, and just seeing where it took you. No, you didn't have a plan, you didn't have an idea, but you just played and had fun, and it was all up in here and all out there, and that was it was such a wonderful space. And then we as become adults, we're kind of trained off of that. I think games like Dungeons and Dragons fall into a space of allowing us to maintain that type of sense of adult play in a safe space where you're allowed to just use your imagination and fuck around with your friends and make stuff up. And a lot of people rediscover that and don't really realize how much fun it is to just play in an imaginative space if they've been away from it for so long. A lot of people,
Right.
like our players, a lot of our players in Critical Role had never played a role-playing game. And while they're actors, they're kind of closer to that space than some others. But even they, when it clicked, watching the big smiles creep across their face and seeing them re-embrace that type of unbridled sense of anything can happen and we're all making it up together. Such a cool and powerful experience.
Also, the times that I've killed something that's like we've killed dragons before, and the immediate moment where we kill that dragon, I get that rush of like, fuck, that was awesome. And I know that everyone watches like, this is the nerdiest shit ever. And I'm like, you're fucking right, it is. This is awesome.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's happened so many times on all of our shows before. I'm just like, yeah, I just told someone to fucking turn around in a spaceship with finger guns. It happened. Think about that for a second. And I was like, that was awesome. It was like, this is the best. Like that's the best feeling, I think, when that happens on any show or in any tabletop game, for sure, for the player.
Yeah, we're used to occupying a space. I think Steven was the one that first explained it to me this way, where if you're playing a video game defines everything that you can do. It says, here's a list of 1,000 things you can do. You can go up, you can go down, you can punch, you can kick, you can jump. It gives you the boundaries of the space. But a tabletop RPG is flipped inside out, and all it says is what you can't do. It just defines, here are a few things that are not part of this game. Every other conceivable action, there is some possibility, however slight or unlikely, you could do that if you want to. So it encourages this Caitlin-esque approach to like,
Yeah.
I'm going to just come up with
Caitlin's
whatever.
already been there. She's already lived that life.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So there are people who occupy this sort of safe space in the middle where they're like, okay, I know what I feel comfortable doing. And then there are people who are pioneers on the outskirts of this weirdness that are like, well, it's not in the book, but I'm going to try and do it anyway. And we develop this thing. And to me, it feels like when you really get in sync with a group of players, and if you've played with the same people enough, this can develop across campaigns, but you get in sync with people. And it's like being in a band, right? Where you know the instruments everybody knows how to play, you know how they prefer to play them, and you can really get into a space where you're riffing off each other and making something really cool that no individual one of you would ever be able to make alone. And the game is what facilitates that. It's the thing that prompts you to say, there's a moment of uncertainty now. Now you have to respond to this unusual thing, and you all work together to get past that place. And it's no wonder to me that Critical Role and role play and watching a spectator sport version of D&D is a popular thing, because it's fun watching bands play, even if they're just jamming. Like it's a thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I found for a lot of the audience that's kind of risen out of this whole trend of live gaming are people that grew up playing role-playing games and loved them so much, but they're working 2 jobs, they have 3 kids, and they don't have the time or their old crew available to play a game in the past 15, 20 years. So they get to kind of live vicariously through the adventures of others. And it's been really, really cool to watch people embrace that aspect of it as well. To play off what you were just saying, there's a wonderful book called Me, Myself, and Why, written by Jennifer Ouellette, which talks about all different aspects of psychology, the human mind. It follows all these different paths of scientific thought on how the human brain works and emotions. It's a great book in general, but it has a section about role-playing games. And they've had studies that talk about the experiences that we have in role-playing games, because it's so based in your imagination, it's so based on the active presence of your choices in that moment, that the brain records the memories of those role-playing game experiences in the same part of the brain that it records actual memories of things you've done and where you've been, which is why, when you tell your friends like a movie you saw or a show you like, it's all this kind of passive, it was cool when this happened, or remember when I saw that. When you talk about your old group, experience, party, Like, remember that time that we all climbed that mountain and took that shot?
I could tell you
Yeah.
right now, almost every like big moment that like people always ask like, what's your favorite moment in roleplay history? Like I immediately go for the teleport on top of a dragon, missing, fall to your death, have another person try to catch him. That person dies, and we use a ring of wishing to wish everything back 30 seconds, and everything was fine. And that happened in like a 2-hour period. And like I'll always have that with me because it's like you said, like those moments are always going to be cherished. And just like it was like, oh man, I remember in that movie when he fucking did the thing and spun around in the fucking Matrix and he did this shit, like same exact shit. So
Yeah, except that it's you, right? Like it may not be you physically doing the thing, but it came from your mind. And I think that kind of thing, that intense devotion, that kind of like creates experiences of wanting to keep doing it, to occupy that fantasy realm. That's what started a lot of the old kind of 80s satanic panic, where it was like these kids are playing Dungeons and Dragons for 10 hours a day on the weekend. They keep talking about these things as if they were really there. My kid must be crazy because my kid is not an elf. I know this. I checked.
Well,
you know, like
to take it another way, like, do you? And this is for the two of you. Do you guys ever get like? It sounds so cocky to say, but do you get creatively tired? Like we do 4 hours of a show, and by the end of that show, I'm like, one, brain dead, and also just physically worn out. Is that the same for you guys after a long DM session, or do you just want to keep doing more?
No, I'm exhausted after a
oh yeah, it's fucking exhausting.
Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not. I thought one of you guys was gonna be the asshole. It's like, yeah, dude, fucking, I do it all the goddamn time.
It's like I have to schedule cooldown time after episodes, because if I don't, like if you get into describing a thing enough and you're working, I'm thinking about the last episode of Swan Song. I do not remember the last half hour of that episode. Like immediately it was just like wiped from my mind because I was so focused on what I was saying and like playing through the episode that afterwards my brain was like, okay, that was kind of traumatic. We're going to just take a step back and I'm not going to force you to remember having to do all that. But at the end of a 4-hour session, I'm
okay, good.
Fatigue for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're done. We're
glad to hear that.
Come home at like 12:30, 1 a.m. and just go catatonic on my bed, turn the lights out, and stare at the ceiling until everything shuts down. And usually Saturdays mornings for me are the real decompression, because Fridays can be busy sometimes, and those kind of come across a little numb and kind of keeping the exhaustion at bay. But it's fulfilling. Like don't get me wrong, we love what we do, but it does take a lot of energy, a lot of concentration, a lot of focus, and it's a great mental workout. But like any good workout, you need time to recover.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking to. We're going to start doing live shows. And so I was talking to the director, and he's like, yeah, I mean, you're flying people out there. So why don't we just go for like 8 to 12 hours on the first day? And I'm like, you want to do what? Like what? No, maybe. Like, I understand what you're saying there, so we can try to save some money, but fuck, that's going to be a goddamn tiring day to go for 8 to 12 hours of like just a single campaign. So I don't know. We'll see. I can't. The longest we did a charity stream, I think last year, maybe the year before, and that was three 3-hour sessions, so 9 hours total in a row, where we had 3 different DMs, but I played in every game. And so by the end, and I produced or ran the stream. It was literally just clicking buttons. But at the end of that day, I was pretty fucking done. Like I
had the same experience with Roll20Con, which we did back in May. Blocking it from my mind.
I think it was May.
Yeah, I ran like 4 one-shots or 3 one-shots, and I was on a panel and played in a game. So I was busy doing role-playing game stuff all day. And at the end of it, it's just like, yep, we're just going to take a long rest now. Just going to lie down, and hopefully tomorrow I'll have all my hit points back. But
for sure.
I mean, even back when we used to play privately, when we had our like extensive 8+ hour sessions that we'd play every few weeks or so, even those were filled with multiple breaks.
Yeah, you can step away from the table and
and like we'd fool around and like have side chatter at the table because we're a much more casual space. But yeah, doing that now, like when you have to be on for an audience for that extended period of time, yeah, no, that's gonna knock you the fuck out.
Yeah.
I gotta say, like, having done both a lot of traditional in-person tabletop role-playing and then the online more structured 4 hours with a break every hour, I kind of like the more structured play. Like, it works better for my brain, and I would rather have 4 or like 3.5 if it's Swan Song, very focused. We're playing the role-playing game hours. Then like 6 hours where you're really only playing for like 3, and there's a lot of bullshitting going on. Like that can be fun, but I feel like as a GM, it's a lot more rewarding for me to just be like, okay, we're playing this role-playing game, and it's going to be a thing. And then when we're done, we're done. But
yeah, no, that's exactly why I kind of like the transition we did for Critical Role. Was it instinctually cut out a lot of that side chatter, and everyone, once the show starts, everyone's in it and everyone's there until it finishes for the most part. And and like I said, as a GM, it's nice to know that everyone is engaged in the narrative on that level, so they're willing to, you know, to stay in that space with you the entire run. And then once you're done, everyone's like, oh,
right, yeah. I have to ask, Matt, having not watched every single episode and every hour of every episode, is there times where, you know, everyone has a bad day, everyone has a bad week, where a player comes in and you as a DM know that something's up, like something's going wrong with X player today, and you kind of just, you know that they need to take kind of a shorter role in this week's episode, and you let them have that? Like, has that ever happened on Critical Role before?
We've had a few moments where a player or another would take some of their emotions or negative energy and express it in the game, because it is for some people it's a release of tension. For some it's an escape from the difficulty of the day, to kind of really put their energy into a positive space if it hasn't. So it does on occasion, but for the most part I haven't had a problem on the stream recently. Everyone's been very like respectful, and if anyone has felt that way, they've been conscious of it and they're willing to take a step back and let other people kind of fill that space. I don't think it's been an issue for a while now. However, private games beforehand,
it always happened.
Yeah, of course. You know, someone comes to the table because they got pulled over 2 days ago and the ticket was more than expected, and then on the way in they stubbed their toe, and all of a sudden their awesome, charming bard is like the biggest fucking asshole. And
I think I'm definitely, for me, I think I'm definitely more of like the emotional player. So if something's been going bad, my character will either play really recklessly because I've just kind of got into I don't give a fuck mode, or if I'm like really sad, you'll see my character kind of playing that way. I think that certain people definitely play that way, where they play their character off of what's been going on for them on day-to-day life, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, it's hard not to, because because no matter how hard you try, you create a character that's different from you. There is still a part of you put into it, especially the longer you play it. There is that, you know, you begin to kind of bleed with them a little bit, and so it's going to happen. And we've had players, one of our players for an extended period of time that was going through a lot of difficulty in his life and had like a loss in his family, and it was a very, very hard time. And knowing that, you can see a little bit of that in the character and the arcs. Whenever the character had a rough moment, it was just that much more rough and impactful. And I felt bad at times, and to ask him after the game, I'm like, I'm sorry, is this okay? He's like, no, this is good. This is actually helping me. It's a therapeutic thing for him. Conversely.
Yeah, I definitely found that for sure. Yeah, definitely. I guess we can kind of get in, because we are getting close to time. I'm not going to keep Matt here any longer than 3 hours, because that's a lot.
That's fine. Just keep me around as long as you want.
Well, we've been going all day.
We'll let Mr. Mercer go, but
we've been going all day, Adam. So obviously that was spoken for. But I do want to ask like favorites, because I think people, audience members, love to hear this type of stuff. So favorite monster doesn't have to necessarily be in D&D, but just kind of describe it, talk about how you've used it and stuff like that. And if it was homebrewed or if it was from somewhere, from a book.
Okay, I'll have two answers to this. One, my favorite monster I've used, and my favorite monster in general is a Beholder, because it's so iconic to Dungeons and Dragons, and it's such a dangerous entity that no matter which age you come into the game, when you say Beholder, people go, oh fuck.
I've never fought one.
Fuck you up.
I've never fought one in a game before. I've never seen one.
Give it time, JP. I love Beholders.
Dude, I will say I've been a little sad, because the first fight they had with them, the party did really good, but it was a really intense boss fight at the end of a huge arc. I brought in another Beholder later on, largely because the new minis had just been released, and I just wanted to use it. It looks so good.
So that's you're the perfect D&D player to Wizards of the Coast, where your game is defined by what kind of peripherals you've purchased.
In that moment, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It was everything I've ever wanted out of a Beholder mini. But I had really bad luck that night, and the party had great luck, and they spanked it, and I was a little sad. But the Beholder to me is still very iconic. Overall, my favorite creature is still the Tarrasque, because it is the ever-present threat of nothing will survive. You will all die. The Godzilla of your D&D.
The Trask is so good because it's winning on a technicality, right? It's like, yeah, it has stats. I'm not cheating. I'm using the stats from the book. And the players are like, come on, though. It's got 3,000 armor class. And you're like, but it's in the book. So.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great because no matter, it's the knowledge that no matter how powerful you get, that thing could probably still fuck you up. So just knowing it exists in the general
lexicon
of D&D to me is wonderful. And even the art for it over the years is awesome. The old second edition art, which was much more like kind of sort of Godzilla-esque to the more 3.5 in the new edition, which is like giant spiked shiny carapace with like the square jaw. I just love the idea of a creature that, slumbers beneath the planet and occasionally rises up to just devour and wreak havoc until eventually it sleeps once again for another age. Like it's a cool idea for a creature.
I'm trying to remember. For me, there was the longest time where my character and my wizard that did the ducking, he could do a lot of things where he could just create portals and stuff like that. And I would always just thumb through the DM's guide for 2.0 and find like just the fucking monsters that are bizarre. Like I think it's called a Lamassu.
Lamassu, yeah.
It's like the
female half panther kind of
yes,
like centaur.
with the man face or the female face or whatever. Like it's just a fucking weird creature. And so I remember we pulled one in. I pulled one into the world and then tried to befriend it and have it fight for us against the big bad. And the DM was just like, the fucking Lamassu says, go fuck yourself, and just flies off, and we never saw him again. But I wanted so bad just to have like these weird creatures that are in some of these older manuals, because you don't I feel like for the longest time I thought like, yeah, here's some goblins and you got some spiders and yeah, here's the normal army guy. Like I love the weird shit.
The old AD&D Fiend Folio is full of all kinds of dumb monster bullshit, like just the stupidest, like the Senmerv. Or the Flump.
The Flump, like, which they brought back the Flump.
They brought back the Flump, which was a nice call. But this is the thing. Like you get to a point where you're like, all right, we've made up all of the monsters anyone can take seriously. Let's go into the B team. What do we got? Who's got one?
Dude. One of my favorite things on the internet ever, and like I was pretty heavily involved in the Something Awful forums. I wasn't really part of the Goon Squad per se, but just I enjoyed a lot of their early, comic internet humor they put up there. Zach Parsons and Steve Sumner had What the Fuck D&D for
so good.
years. It's so good. And they just, if you guys haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. Just WTF D&D, and they have article after article after article of them both in character presenting some of the most ridiculous shit in RPGs.
I think I've read some of this.
Commenting.
Yeah.
Oh, it's phenomenal. Highly recommended.
Yeah, there are so many good like classic weird monsters. Like I love a well-played goblin, and like the Beholder is great, the Mind Flayer is great. But for my money, if you're looking for like just the evilest, like worst shit you can find in a Dungeons and Dragons game, my favorite monster is the player character.
Yeah. Okay.
Like there is nothing I can come up with that's going to be as much of an atrocity as the players that are in my games. Like, I can't compete. There's just nothing there.
True.
Like
it's a very valid point.
That's true. What is the strongest guy or strongest monster from I guess like D&D that you guys have ever thrown into a game, and had the players fight like
as a monster, not just like a set piece?
Yeah, as not like, oh, there's a Tarrasque around the corner. Don't go around the corner.
Right.
Like, what's the one you guys have ever? I'm sure it's like a dragon or something, right? Like,
we're at a point in the campaign. Everyone's getting like 14th, 15th level, and
shit, you guys are super high.
Yeah, their arc right now is they're combating something called the Chroma Conclave, which was a group of ancient chromatic dragons that normally would despise each other, have banded together, and as a team have just destroyed half the countryside. And like the giant red is now sitting on the main city and is basically building a nest of "fuck you, I own the place now." And so they're at a part now where they've fought and killed, most recently, an ancient black dragon named Umbrasil. And they did it with the help of an entire barbarian tribe that helped hold it down, a golem that they were controlling.
Man,
it was an epic confrontation, but that to this date is the most powerful creature I've thrown at a group as part of the natural story progression, as opposed to like a one-shot for fun. And I'm really excited because most campaigns kind of end around level 11.
That's why when you said 14, I was like, damn, like I've never played a D&D campaign past 8th because we had a TPK, which I guess we'll also ask a question about that. But yeah, I don't even know. as a character, you have so many options at that level to where you can almost like too many. I feel like I'd be presented and just get kind of flustered with everything that I could do in a fight.
With spellcasters especially.
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
turns that take a little longer, but also since you've been with the character that long, you do kind of
It's just like an MMO character, yeah.
Yeah. You know which ones work best, and occasionally you might pull a weird one out of your pocket, but you have your tried and true like 5 or 6 go-tos, so it's not too crazy.
I guess before we get to the idea of TPKs, what about classes? Like, what's your favorite class to play? Because I've pretty much played every class in terms of melee, healer, cleric, all that different type of mage. But I've always found that like playing the sorcerer that has the crazy, and when I say crazy, I don't mean like overpowered. I don't mean like fucking fireballs and shit. I mean just the bizarre spells and they don't really exist too much in 5e. But 2e had some really weird spells that had like such niche places to use them. And I love taking that and applying it to something that would never make sense. But I'm just like, I cast that. And the DM's like, what? Like, what is your goal here?
I love playing with new players that play spellcasters because of that. Like in the D&D game I'm playing for Roll20 right now, we have a player who's never played before. Blue Jay's never played D&D. She's playing a druid, and she doesn't have any of the bad habits that people who've played D&D for longer pick up around their character options. She just picks spells because they look like fun, and we'll just cast them for kicks in situations that seem like, I don't know, maybe this would be useful. Like I'm going to cast Speak with Animals and go talk to that crane over there because it seems like a fun thing to do.
Yep. We had a potion of Speak with Fish in one of our campaigns, and there was a dragon sleeping at the bottom of a lake. And so we had this potion. I was like, I'm going to have Fish like lead this dragon over to the shore so we could fight it and not have this fucking crazy surprise attack on us, but have the surprise on him. And I love like that. That's what I think I like about D&D the best, which we've already talked about. It's just taking that stuff and applying it to a situation and just making it work.
D&D doesn't have any impervious chain link fences, right? Like the GM, if the GM is doing, because I think a lot of GMs put those chain link fences up. There are plot walls you're not supposed to be able to climb, but a good GM will never be like, you hit the edge of my plot, turn the fuck around.
Yeah.
I also liked telling. A player was trying to get this pervy wizard to give her something, and I decided to cast command from a window on the pervy wizard to strip nude, and the player character wasn't aware of this. He just started taking his clothes off in front of her. Said the DM, and the player character is just like, what the fuck is going on? And so like stuff like that, I enjoy the fucking about of other PCs.
Oh yeah.
In the comical sense, I don't want to piss someone off. I've done that before, and it's there's a very thin line there for sure.
Yeah, we have our barbarian Goliath, who Travis plays, Grog, had acquired a belt of dwarven kind, which he was excited about the Constitution bonus, but was even more excited about the prospect of growing a beard, because being a Goliath, they normally don't have facial hair, and so he was like super excited about having a beard. And as soon as it took him like a series of rolls to finally grow it out, the first night they rest, our rogue goes and shaves him in his sleep.
Nice.
And so and they've had this rivalry going on for ages since then. It's just, and so like I love that. I love players fucking with each other in like non-dangerous ways.
Yeah, non-threatening ways. Yeah, for sure.
To answer your question, I always gravitate towards casters for that reason. I like the breadth of like weird and eccentric spells that you can just like tailor to situations you wouldn't expect, and having those options I think is really cool. And of the spellcasters, I've always been a fan of the Bard. I think the Bard was largely shit on in older editions and didn't get the respect that it deserved. The idea of like a jack of all trades, a guy who kind of knows a little bit of everything, who wanders and is a face man. I've always been a proponent for charisma, even when it used to be the big dump stat. I love social elements in games, so I've always loved the Bard. And it hasn't been until really the last couple of editions, especially 5th edition, that it's become a really competitive, powerful class. And I'm really excited to see it as a viable class for people that normally wouldn't consider it.
Bard's been the one character I played it during Dungeon World, but then I realized I hate it because on a stream, everyone's like, oh, he's gonna sing for us. Like this is gonna be great. You can blame
Shannon and Marcus for that.
Yeah, like we had 2 other players, and like Marcus would take like Katy Perry and like popular songs of the time when we were playing like a year ago, and then inject, things from the show and things from the actual story going on into the lyrics, and the crowd would just fucking go crazy. And then I'm just like, I'm not musically inclined at all. Here's a recorder, and I would just
I was about to
shittily
say,
play the
you gotta get that
recorder.
Yeah.
And just play like 1 or 2 notes. And so I've always strayed away from the bard because, like you said, it is not only is it like statistically a charisma driven character, but I feel like you also have to almost put on a show if you're doing like a Twitch stream for it. So I've always shied away from that because I don't sing.
It also depends on the build you make it too, because like Marisha, my girlfriend, she made a bard once that was a half orc, essentially a military drummer, like a frontline company drummer.
Yeah.
And so her weapon as a bard was a giant club, and she carried the drum with her other hand. And so she'd do like an actual war drum hit during the battle, and then hit with her actual
That's pretty cool.
The battle. So like there are ways to flavor a bard that aren't all that same kind of hey, look at me, I'm a bard.
I played in second edition. I played a bard who was a like a propagandist. Like my job was to go to towns and like spread like bad news about elves because we were in the middle of a war with elves. Unfortunately, he was crucified by an elf in like the 3rd session, but he was fun to play until he was crucified.
That's a really cool character theme. I like that.
Yeah, just to convince people that elves were evil and they were going to like wreck up the place, and we needed to get the elves out of our kingdom. And
what about favorite class for you, Adam? What do you tend to play?
I almost always gravitate towards clerics or paladins, partially because like with clerics, I like being like my relationship to the other players. I like supporting them. I like being that guy that's like, you go do all the mass damage. You be the crit guy. I'm gonna keep you up. I'm gonna keep you alive. Also, people always need the healer. So if things get, I've got a little bit of like aversion to abandonment here because of my past with D&D, where I'm like you can see me do it in the West Marches where I play a cleric, I pick the toughest person in the party, and I just make them my best friend so they'll protect me if things go wrong. But I also really like the idea of authority in narratives. I like stories about authority. And I like religion in fantasy. I like the idea of like, what would it be like to be in a world in which the gods actually exist and could give you magic powers, and why wouldn't you worship them? Like you can bring people back from the dead. So exploring theories of authority and how that plays out. And so that for me as a person absorbing narrative is always really fun. So I can include those in my games even if I'm not GMing them if I play a cleric.
Nice.
That's cool.
I feel maybe this is probably the wrong question, but do you guys have a favorite rule set? Is there maybe not favorite, just like if you were to start a new campaign tomorrow? That's a better question. If you were to start a campaign tomorrow, what would you play?
Burning Wheel. Like no question, it's my favorite role-playing game ever. I would play it if I could only ever play one RPG for the rest of my life. That'd be the one because it's just so deep. There's so much going on in that game that it's an easy answer.
I remember I saw the character sheet for that, and I was just like, well. That's a math problem.
It's so good. Yeah. It's because I like it because as a game, it's like the Dark Souls of role-playing games, because if you don't bother to learn how it works, you just try to flail your way through it, you will fail. You will make an ass of yourself and you will never understand the game. But if you sit down with it and you really work at it and you learn, and the longer you play, the better you're going to get at it. And so a person who's been playing Burning Wheel for 5 years just has an intuitive understanding of the way all the mechanisms work together. And they're going to have a better time playing it than someone who's just picking up. I like the idea of investing time and energy into a game, especially because I play games with folks who are not predominantly role players very often. And so I tend to GM games that are quite easy to learn. So I like Burning Wheel and its family of games for the demands that it puts on the people that are playing it.
I feel like if we did a Burning Wheel campaign for role play stuff, it would just turn into Shadowrun all over again, where none of the players are just, we're 20 weeks in. Adam, how do we fight it? I have to roll how many? It's sixes, right? That's what we're doing? It's just a bunch of six die.
The actual play of the game is not that complex. It's just making your character that's very difficult, and you're making a lot of choices. And then once you actually play, it's just kind of a dice pool thing. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You really do have to have people who are dedicated to the idea of the rules. I definitely remember in the second or third last episode of Mirror Shades when you told me a rule before I had a chance to explain it to you, and I was just like,
yeah. That was week 30. Week 30 of a fucking campaign, and I'm just like, Shadowrun is
Yeah. I was so
It's
used
a
to
2d6, right?
I was so used to the situation where the characters would be like, okay, I'm going to shoot him with my gun. I'm like, all right, so find on your character sheet what skill you're using and roll that many dice. And JP was like, wait, this is damage code of 5M6. And I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know the rules for your character.
And it's not because we didn't take the time to learn them. It's because that show is infrequent enough to where we would spend, a week or two away. And when all of the people on the show are playing other games, we're in other different role play shows, we'd come back and have to literally relearn the entire system again. And it was just a fucking nightmare for me to remember all that shit. Matt, what about you? What if you were to play a new campaign tomorrow, what would you start it with?
If it was short term, like 2 or 3 sessions, I'd probably run a paranoia game.
I've never played that. Yeah. I know exactly what it is, and I've read the rules before. I've never played it though.
It's weird as shit and just a fun, weird, funky narrative, and it's a lot of fun.
I like the art for that. The art, in the rule book, looks really cool.
They have new rules coming out, so a new edition that's supposed to be.
Oh
They
shit!
do, yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
So I'm excited to see what that is. But if it was more of a long-term thing, I would love to do original rules of Deadlands.
Yeah.
I would be all about that. Yeah. The idea that use poker chips and fate chips to affect the game, both as a GM and as a player, and that the huckster, one of the casting.
Yeah, you play poker.
You're actually playing poker with devils, demons, to borrow their power to do the spell, and basically how good your hand is, dictates how powerful or not powerful the spell is. And if you do really bad in your hand, it can end up being a really bad thing for you, losing to a demon in a game of poker. So
that sounds like my favorite way to. I like mage or caster characters where it's not just I cast magic missile, it's I cast magic missile and this is how powerful or weak it is. Like that sounds really fucking cool.
JP, you should check out. There's a game called DCC or Dungeon Crawl Classics. Every spell in that game has its own table that you roll on when you cast it. So your magic missile might be a 1 damage, flea-sized bolt of lightning, or it might be a blast that can take on 50 people at once, and it's totally random depending on how powerful you are. There's a modifier, but you don't know when you cast it. You're just like, okay, here we go. Yeah, and it might be one of like a dozen different things. The casters in the game are primo. That's
why it was so fun to play the wild sork or wild magic sorcerer from 5e. Is because they have that random table, and people would always be like, "Why do you always want to roll in the random?" Because you can make unicorns happen and just have a unicorn happen in front of you.
Just be thankful that they scaled back the wild magic table than what it used to be.
No, the old one was fucking brutal sometimes.
Hey guys, we're level 3. Good job. I'm gonna go ahead and cast magic missile. Oops, I summoned a Baylor.
Yeah. Or I cast fireball on us, like
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're fun though. They're fun.
Yeah, no, they're awesome.
I might have to revisit. We'll see what happens in our new show. Maybe I'll revisit that. Maybe I can get someone else to play tank. We'll see.
You can always multi-class. Just pick up some extra.
Oh yeah, that'll be good. Play a berserker that's a multi-class. I think my int is like 9 in
Chaos
that.
So it's fine.
Yeah,
use your charisma. You'll be fine. Just
fantastic.
Believe in yourself.
Well, I think we're gonna go ahead and call that a show. I think we could all continue talking for hours and hours on this, but 3 hours is enough, and we've been live since 12, so we're gonna go ahead and call that a day. Matt, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute blast chatting with you guys.
You want to do any shout outs? Talk about the next Critical Role show, anything like that? Where you're gonna be next? I know you're doing a ton of different cons coming up. Same as Adam. So.
I'm going to be at Gen Con next week, Thursday through Sunday. Number of panels that are set up there if you want to check it out. We're doing our Gen Con live show next Saturday. This will be our second live show ever in front of an audience. It's going to be Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, and tickets are still available. Mostly, you need to get them soon. But yeah, so we'll be there for that. You can check out all the info on geekandsundry.com. They have it there. But other than that, every Monday for the next few weeks, we'll be releasing more episodes of Force Grey Giant Hunters, which is a video series where I dungeon master a bunch of celebrities like Ashley Johnson from our show, Chris Hardwick, Jonah Ray, a bunch of really, really great, talented, fun people through a short D&D campaign. So that's on nerdist.com every Monday, I believe.
Yeah. And I think, is that Nerdist YouTube?
Nerdist YouTube has it, yeah.
Yeah, Nerdist YouTube. Yeah, there you go. Adam, some shout outs. Talk about all the stuff you're doing.
Totally, yeah. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm the GM here at Roleplay, and I'm the GM in residence over at Roll20. You can catch me running games right here. I think Tuesday is our next game. We're going to be playing episode 2 of Court of Swords, which I hope you get a chance to check out today. It's a brand new 5e campaign. I've done some cool hacks that people seem to be pretty into, so you can check that out here. And then I also run the D&D Adventures League right now over at Roll20 app on Twitch. If you want to check out my own personal stuff, you can find me on Twitter at Skinny Ghost or twitch.tv/Adam Koebel.
There you go. Chat is crucifying me for not asking about the TPK. Adam, you almost have one. Never mind. I can't talk about spoilers for that show.
Something happened. It's fine.
Yeah, but have you ever killed off an entire party, and how did it happen? Real quick, Adam.
No, I don't kill characters. I make them suffer. So
Okay.
the TPK is a mistake. If that happens, things have gone too far, and then I've taken away all my precious toys.
There you go. Matt, what about you? Ever killed an entire party, and how'd it go down?
I've never killed an entire party. I've had most of a party get killed.
You left one guy out. That's even more fucked up.
Yeah, you gotta leave a survivor.
Yeah, well,
Oh.
the point is it gives them an opportunity to try and recover the remnants of their party for any possible resurrection, or at least to bury them properly and kind of continue the story from there. Otherwise, it just ends at that moment. And that's a little storytelling standpoint. We've had a few close TPKs on Critical Role, but it's fun because I don't want to kill the players per se, but you also have to have real danger.
Yeah, you have to have danger.
Yeah.
It's not fun. Yeah.
Totally.
Exactly. So it's a possibility. I'd be hard pressed to have a TPK because I think if it starts going that route, the players will begin to notice there is an option to leave. Like, we have to go grab whoever's left and we'll come back. If there is a real TPK, either you really planned poorly or the party just thought themselves invincible and kept hitting until it was over, in which case you all have a valuable lesson.
I feel like, and maybe this is a misjudge of the of your community, but I feel like if roleplay happens, or if a TPK happens on roleplay, chat is like crying for it. They want us all to die. I feel like your community would be so fucking upset that someone died, and they would be so sad if someone on that show died.
I'm so excited for when it happens.
You're gonna get hate mail. You're gonna wake up to just the worst tweets in the world. How could you fucking do this, Matt?
Dude, even we had one character in our show that ended up being killed because they had fought this boss. They were down in a dungeon. The artifact they were seeking was there, and they were so exhausted they never checked for traps. And so one of them just grabbed it. It set off a necrotic trap, and one of them saved, one of them didn't. And she was such low in hit points that it brought her to 0. And the nature of this trap was, if you go to 0 from the damage, you just die. And so shit out. And they managed to resurrect her through the ritual. But I got home that night, and then my girlfriend was going through Tumblr looking at responses to the show, and people were like, "Fuck you, Mercy!" And
they had to destroy their shrine of their favorite character, man. How could you do that?
I can't say I didn't enjoy it, because that's investment. That's good narrative when you're affecting people to that degree. While they may be angry, I consider that from a storyteller standpoint a success. So
yeah. So there you go. The final words are that all DMs are assholes is basically what Matt's saying.
There you go.
Pretty much, yeah.
Take that for what it's worth, guys.
We feed off your sorrow. That's our thing. That's what we do.
Yeah,
give it to us.
That's a GIF. That's you're gonna be stuck. I like how it's just complete darkness around you, and the GIF is just gonna be this. So many.
Apparently,
many uses.
I was consumed by the abyss throughout the length of this interview.
Yeah, that looks great. That looks great. All right, guys, that's going to do it for Fandom. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. We will see you guys next time. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Take care.